Now, it's time for us to move on to the next segment,
Okay.
which is called
Rapid Bias.
And in this segment, I'll be asking my guests biased questions that they've got asked at some point in life.
Ooh.
And in Michelle's case, it will be biased questions people have about her or adoptees in general. So, Michelle, are you ready
Yes.
for all the questions?
I'm ready.
Okay. All right, let's get started. First question. Why is it so wrong to call the birth family real family and so on?
Oh, okay. Because then if you call them a real family member or whatever, then you're basically discounting that this person is already living a real life. You know what I mean? So it's like, I like to use first family, biological family, birth family. I say Korean family in my case, but I always, and sometimes I actually do say family now because we've been in touch for like 20 plus years. But like in general, you know, if you say like, oh, have you met your real family? Well, it's like, well, then what's my family now? You know, what's the family that raised me now? Not everyone has like a great, you know, adoptive family situation. So I always want to be really mindful of that. But I just think when you say real, it's like, well, this life that you're living here is not real. It's only real if you meet your birth family, you know? And so that's why I try to avoid real.
The next question. Why is it hurtful to blame adoptees for their proximity to whiteness?
Because it's not, okay, so it's not fair to blame adoptees for that because a lot of times that's how they were raised, you know, and they didn't have a choice in it. So it's like, you know, if we had choices, then okay, then blame us for our choices. But when things are not our choices, we can't help it. I can't help the fact, and I don't think it's a fault either, but I can't help the fact that I was raised in Missouri with white parents. I can't help that. You know, was it perfect? No. But like if I lived in Korea, especially because I know my Korean family too, I know that wouldn't have been perfect either. So yeah, it's just really not fair because it's so hurtful, and it also makes adoptees feel even less, again, that they have to like overcompensate for being Asian. You know, like for me, like studying Korean language, going to Korea, like doing all these things to just prove to people like I'm really Korean, when really I was enough. I was enough to begin with.
And the third question is, why do adoptees fight the notion that they should be grateful for being adopted?
I love this question. This is a really big conversation right now for adoptees. I think it's just the idea that, of course, you know, like I am grateful, but I can also have grief. You know, you can live in gratitude and in grief. Just like you might not have, you know, like if you have biological parents that you live with, you know, you're not always going to be like, I'm so grateful for you. You know, like just the expectation is different for adoptees because then it comes up with this like savior mentality, like, oh, but you were saved, you know, someone saved you. And you know, why there might be some degree in that of truthfulness. It's this idea of like, you know, you're just a human being. You're just a person. You're just a daughter. You're just a son. You know, no family is perfect. And so to constantly have someone be grateful for a life that they didn't choose is not, it shouldn't be a mandate. You know what I mean? Like, oh, well, you should be grateful. Just like when I was having fertility issues, we had our son through IVF. There were people out there, because, you know, I'm a public face or whatever. People would say like the craziest things to me, like, well, don't you think that you should adopt because you were adopted? You know, you owe it to like society basically to adopt. And I would always be like, wow, I just feel like I should have a choice in how I want to, you know, have my family. And for me, that was like, I wanted to have a birth connection, you know, a biological connection to just one person on earth. I mean, I know my Korean family, I love them very much, but like and my sister and I are so close, but at the same time, we didn't come up together. We weren't raised together in the same family. So even though we know we're related, we know we're sisters, it's, my biological sisters have a different relationship with each other than they do with me. And so I really wanted this biological connection with my son, or with, whoever I was going to, have a baby. So it's just this whole gratitude thing. Yes, of course, many adoptees are grateful if they were, raised in a loving household. But it shouldn't be a mandate. And we always have to remember that not every adoptive family is a good family. And not every person who adopts should be adopting kids.
That's so powerful. Yeah. And it's just the basic idea of like, it's okay for everyone to want whatever they want, and all emotions are valid. So no one should ever tell them that they are not supposed to feel a certain way, right? So
right. I mean, can you imagine like just one of my friends saying, I'm complaining about their parents or something, and then you go, well, you should be grateful. You just can't do that all the time for people. Of course, you're gonna have real emotions. So that's just life.
Exactly. And moving on, isn't adoption a privilege, or are all families rich?
That's a very easy question. No, not all families are rich. I do think that there is some sort of privilege to it, right? Because you have to have a certain amount of money before you can adopt. When my parents adopted when they started the process in the early 80s, late 70s, because I was born in the 70s. I think back then it was like $10,000, which was a lot of money. Now it's like tens of thousands of dollars more. So there is, inflation, whatever. But it was still a privilege. But I know a lot of adoptees like myself who grew up in economically disadvantaged families. I was the first generation college student. I lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, growing up. And so my parents could afford more things because they only had one child. Like I had a car, when I was 16, but it wasn't like a great car, it was, oh my gosh, it could fit like 11 people and it was brown. So it's just, I know a lot of adoptees who grew up in very rural households where they were also the first generation college student. So, I don't think, of course, there is a money factor, but you don't know how people get their money. You don't know how people, some people who really want to adopt, they might save up all their savings, in order to do this. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they are in rich households. And I certainly was not.
And finally, in rapid bias, why can't there be more than one Asian face on the news?
I ask that same question all the time. You know what? People used to say that to me. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but like coming up in this business, 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, people used to say, oh, Michelle, you can't, you won't get hired in Raleigh because, there's already an Asian person here and we can't have two of you because it would confuse the viewer. And, it's so funny. I don't think people say that now, but I still think people hire that way now because in most of my job settings, even in Seattle, there were times where I was either the first or the only. And if you actually do a snapshot of the top 20 markets, and the AAJA, the Asian American Journalists Association, did this, they found that Asian Americans are really underrepresented in the top 20 markets, which really means that they're underrepresented in the top 200 markets. And a lot of times that has to do with the bias that Asian people don't exist in these markets, or that we can't have two of them because then it's too many Asians. And it's really weird how that is still a thing. But if you look at the hiring, it's very much a thing. And also, East Asians, I think probably have the most representation. But if you look at South Asians, if you look at men in general, Asian American men, vastly underrepresented. So I'm always like, I'm really grateful to be in the position that I'm in, but I think I'm the first East Asian, like Monday through Friday, like main anchor that St. Louis has ever had.
Wow.
And I don't think that's intentional. I mean, they've had a lot of Asian people, through here, but I mean, in terms of like the investment of making someone a Monday through Friday, I'm fairly certain, but I don't have like data on it because like no one has collected the data. But, we have like a list of who people we've hired, in the station, because you can look at it in Wikipedia. You can talk, you can go back 75 years and not see a Monday through Friday Asian American.
Wow.
Yeah. I think I should say East Asian, though, because we have a South Asian Monday through Friday anchor, not at our station, but in the market. But still, that's only 2 people,
I know.
But even like in Seattle, there would be times when you wouldn't see Asian Americans in a certain light, or the same in like Wisconsin or North Carolina. And then in the adoptee space, oh my gosh, it's even smaller. There are very few transracial adoptees in media. And the reason I think that's important is because of the language that people use to describe adoption and adoptees, and having those narratives and those experiences in newsrooms, I think matter when you're covering children in foster care or the adoption experience as a whole. It's always good to have some representation of someone, in a newsroom. And that's with like all walks of life, it's good to have that representation because people tell more empathetic stories.
Exactly. And hopefully with the amazing work that people see you do, the Very Asian Foundation, and also shout out to the AAJA, that this is going to change. I really hope it's going to change very soon. Thank you so much for answering all the questions in this Rapid Bias segment, Michelle.
Yes, thank you.